Hey folks, it's Ardwulf. Welcome. Today we have an unboxing of a thing that I've been waiting for some time. This is Fatal Alliances from Andrew Rader, Compass Games, and the Australian Design Group. Now, Andrew Rader is a name that is familiar to me due to his design of Stellar Horizons, also from Compass, which is a game that I like a lot. This is not in that ballpark. This is essentially World in Flames Final Edition for World War I, and folks who have played the World in Flames Final Edition should find Fatal Alliances extremely familiar. It is published by Compass Games, but the internal components are going to look a lot like the internal components from World in Flames Final Edition, or, akin to something that the Australian Design Group would put out. Now, this is a friend copy that I am unboxing due to the kindness of he who I won't name in fear of getting demonetized for the video. You know who you are. I do have this. Mine is already punch clipped and organized. I picked this up at Compass Expo. It's going to be relatively complicated, but I think the complexity is a notch or half a notch below the complexity for World in Flames Final Edition. It's basically got a lot of the features that you'd expect if you're a WIF player. So let's open her up and see what we get. Now, the first thing we notice is this is a game from a few years ago. And it's also, by the way, called Fatal Alliances 3. Previous versions of Fatal Alliances were released as kits with map overlays and stuff that you could use to play World War I using World in Flames physical components. This is its own standalone product, which I think is a desirable way to handle that kind of thing. So let's open her up and see what we get. As usual for Compass Games at the time, the box back is upside down, which triggers my OCD, but is not exactly the end of the world. Now, if you order this from Compass, you ought to get to the errata counter sheet, which looks like this. About half of this is actually errata counters, actually less than that. And the rest of it is just extra counters. A couple of these are actually, 4, maybe 6 of these are actual erratas. So the rest are replacements. If you don't have this, you can ask Compass for them, and they will be happy to provide them. But if you just bought it from them, it probably is going to come with it. So let's open her up and see what we get. All right, we get 2 10-sided dice. It is a D10 based game. We get a 2015 and 16 Compass Games catalog, which we are not going to go through. If it was new, maybe we would, but we would put that in its own video. All right, let's first of all bust out a map so we can take a look. Now, there's 3 maps in here. The main action takes place on 2 maps, which are basically Eastern and Western Europe. And which, other than political borders, look very similar to World in Flames Final Edition maps. Let's pick Western Europe. I think it will work better on camera. Map print quality is nice. It's on a shiny paper. I wonder if this isn't that slightly older Compass Games map stock that the print can tend to get a little brittle with. I'm not sure I see signs of that, but maybe that is a thing. I think I do see signs of that right here. It'll start to chip away along the creases. So if you're somebody that stores your maps flat, this is a great candidate for that. Now, so you got 2 of these basically standard size maps, again, for Western and Eastern Europe, and then you have a third map, which is weird size, which represents at a off-map hex scale, and WIF folks will know what I mean by that, the entire rest of the planet. Eastern Africa all the way through the Pacific to both North and South America. And this way the game will allow you to do those parts of World War I that happen in places like the Pacific. There was World War I action in the Pacific. We here in the West tend to downplay the Japanese involvement, but yes, the Japanese were in World War I and actually made a substantial contribution in the Pacific. I won't say they affected the European War, but they certainly didn't make the Germans happy because they were with the Allies. Okay, this is the rule book. It is a 56-page matte color, a matte finish rule book. Looks a lot like a World in Flames rule book. Now, I will tell you that there are some omissions in the printed rule book that came in the box. So if you're going to pick up Fatal Alliances, don't use this rule book. Go download the latest living rules from the Compass website and use that instead. 2d10 combat results table, which smells like an option to me. Full color, nice looking rulebook, but not tons and tons of illustrations. The rulebook that you will download looks even more like an ADG rulebook, by the way. We're going to get some player aid cards. Just one. Is that correct? Yeah, it looks like it. All right, so there's a player aid card. That's this thing. It is 11 by 17, double-sided. It's got the naval combat chart, allowable activities on one side. Now, so in World in Flames, play proceeds in impulses, and impulses are components of a single bi-monthly turn. A turn is 2 months. So say March, April is one turn. And then you conduct a series of impulses and then move a counter along a track to determine when that turn is going to end, which is somewhat random. And it will tend to end faster if the weather's bad, which obviously there's more chance of in, say, winter seasonal turns. The turns are not seasonal, they're 2 months. And then in each impulse, when you go as your turn, each country will select a type of action. There's naval, air, land combined, and then the enemy can do certain things inside your impulse, like they can fly air interception missions, for example. That's not going to be a huge factor here in World War I, obviously, but all of that technological advancement is basically managed in a very built-in way in Fatal Alliances and in World in Flames by the force pools. When new technology becomes available, you put it in a force pool, and it's that simple, and you don't really have to manage it. That decision is kind of out of your hands to some extent. There are options in World in Flames, not sure if they're present here in Fatal Alliances, to kind of build ahead, build future force pool units, but that's expensive, and generally you want to be very selective about how you do it. Now on the back side, there is a national morale statistic here in Fatal Alliances as well. You've got the weather chart, which looks exactly like the World in Flames weather chart. You've got a production multiple. A discussion of the WIF production system is well beyond the scope of this video, but it is fairly complicated. I don't think it's incredibly complicated, but it's fairly complicated, where you have resources in factories and you have to ship the resources to the factories, and then that produces build points that you actually spend to buy units, which then go on this thing, the production spiral, and different types of units take different amounts of time to build. So an armored unit, which is, there's not going to be too many of here in World War I. An infantry unit is probably going to take 2 or 3 turns, for example. So if you build it, order the infantry unit in November, it's probably showing up in March or April. Here's the impulse track that we mentioned before. There is an additional sort of general records track over here, which is pretty weird because it actually snakes up and down, and I think that's strange and unusual, and I haven't gotten used to it yet. Now you'll notice that the year track runs from 1905 to 1919. I am aware of no official support. If you are, please let me know in the comments. I will be delighted to examine that material. That allows you to start any game in 1905. So if you know that that's been worked on at some point, let me know. You also have this morale and political chart. So this is a new political system for Fatal Alliances that resembles, but is not identical to, the Millennium Annual Politics in Flames system for World in Flames. It kind of gives you the heart of a Days of Decision type of mechanism, but doesn't burden you with playing a whole sub-game or side game that Days of Decision does. So this is a very interesting looking mechanic. Things move along a track. If they hit the end of the track, they hit Central Powers active ally or allied active ally, or they can just be pushed there if the other side attacks them. There's also a morale track in the middle. Certain countries can be pushed to revolution, and not just Russia. Here is a 2d10 combat results table. That's an option. The normal combat results table is actually just a d10 combat results table, unless it's not an option here. Where is it? Maybe it's standard in Fatal Alliances. I'm not sure I picked up on that since I've been studying World in Flames more, and it's easy to get the two mixed up. So I think you can download this as well. This is the Great War setup. This tells you what you are setting up for each major power in the Great War setup. That's going to be the main scenario. And then there's a 1917 setup as well. And then we have counters. There's a lot of counters here. There are 6 counter sheets. So counter sheet 1 is the U.S. entry. Works very similarly to the way it, not identically, but very similarly to the way it works in World in Flames. You get your partisans, you get your minor political markers, and several of the errata counters are actually new minor political markers that were like missing the numbers. Sheet number 2 is the Commonwealth. That's, Britain and Australia and the British Empire. In this case, they are in the British quote-unquote khaki rather than the British dark blue, as in previous editions of World in Flames. That dark blue was quite hard to read stuff on, so I'm glad they went to the khaki. It looks better, it's more period appropriate, and it's a lot easier to read. Sheet 3, we get the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and Italy. So interestingly, there are no separate markers for like red Russians if the Russian Revolution should break out. You are supposed to determine counter by counter which allegiance, red or white, each counter goes to, and then denote that by counter orientation, which I think is clumsy. But if there had been separate counters for them, that would be equally clumsy because you would basically almost need an entire separate counter mix for the reds. So, it's a suboptimal solution, but I'm not sure how better to handle it without reworking the mechanic. Ottoman Empire in a sort of bright purple, and Italy in the traditional Italian color for World in Flames. Here we have on sheet number 3 the French, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and you'll notice, interestingly, that the Austrians are a different color than the Hungarians. There is a special mechanic for Austria-Hungary, the dual monarchy, in Fatal Alliances. And we also have China. We have the Republic of China and the Empire of China. And I have not read those rules yet, so I'm not sure how that works. So it looks like we have basically 2 full counter sets for the Chinese as well. That seems like a lot of Chinese counters, but things can happen, right? We have basically an entire sheet of Germans and other minor powers that are the same background color as the Germans because that's the way they are in World in Flames. So, for example, the Finns, the Romanians, and the Bulgarians, all the colors basically match the current edition of World in Flames and the last couple of editions of World in Flames. Here we have Japan, which is in red. We notice there's a lot of Japanese units, but a lot of them are ships as well, and various minors on the last counter sheet. This deep red that they've chosen for the Japanese is the only real remaining counter background color in World in Flames. And it's like this in World in Flames 2, where the print is still pretty hard to read due to contrast. And then we've got, again, some assorted minors as well. Okay, so this has been a quite brief look at the innards of Fatal Alliances from Compass Games, designer Andrew Rader, and at least agreement with the Australian design group. This is a thing that I've been wanting to get hold of for some time. It comes highly recommended by my whiff playing buddies, and I have high confidence that this will in fact hit my table at some point, possibly not in 2023, because other stuff's tying up the entire first half of the year, but I'm sure we will eventually get to this. And frankly, I think this has a pretty good chance of being my go-to game of its kind. World War I strategic level, large footprint game. So hopefully you have found this valuable and or illuminating. If so, please do give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more wargaming content. I'd like to give a special shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, without whom it would be much more difficult to get any of the kind of content done that we do here. So thank you, patrons. Thank you for watching, and until next time, happy wargaming.